So, um, imagine you're walking into like a modern place of worship today.
Okay.
You open the doors, and you're fully expecting to see, maybe a choir or a projector screen, some rows of comfortable seating, maybe some beautiful stained glass, right?
Right. The usual setup.
Exactly. But instead, the very first thing you see, sitting dead center in the room, is this massive, literal butcher's block.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, it is just completely covered in blood. There's fire, there's smoke, and there's that unmistakable smell of burning flesh.
Yeah, that would be intense.
It would be terrifying if you saw that today. I mean, your first instinct wouldn't be to, sit down and pray.
No, definitely not.
Your first instinct would probably be to run out and call the police. You'd think you had stumbled into some kind of horror
I
movie.
really would.
Yet, if we look back through history, for thousands of years, this wasn't a horror movie at all. This was, well, it was the exclusive, undisputed, and totally normal language of approaching God.
It really is an incredibly jarring image for the modern mind, isn't it?
Oh, totally.
And I think it perfectly captures the friction that we experience, that you, the listener, probably experience when you try to engage with ancient religious texts.
Yeah, because it just feels so alien to us.
Exactly, because we live in an era that really values the sterilization of our spiritual lives. I mean, we want the ethics of ancient traditions.
Sure, we want the community.
Right, the community, the emphasis on loving our neighbor, maybe the psychological comfort of a higher power.
But without all the mess?
Yes, we desperately want to bypass the altar to get those things. So when modern readers hit words in the biblical text like, sacrifice or blood atonement or slaughter,
Which are everywhere in those texts.
they are everywhere, and the immediate reflex is just to cringe. We try to write it all off as this archaic superstition.
Like it's just a primitive relic of a Bronze Age society that we've thankfully outgrown.
Exactly.
We just want to sanitize the narrative. I mean, we want a spirituality that feels like a quiet coffee shop, not a slaughterhouse.
A coffee shop. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
And, well, that friction is the entire mission of our deep dive today.
Mm-hmm.
We're taking a massive stack of research today. Specifically, we're anchoring our conversation around this really comprehensive theological article and a series of incredibly detailed infographics.
Chris Arvelasis, right?
Yeah, titled Worship Through Sacrifice. And we're going to unpack these sources to completely reframe this modern discomfort.
Because it really needs reframing.
It does. The goal here is to explore how this blood-soaked, seemingly primitive concept of sacrifice is actually, paradoxically, the ultimate language of restored relationship.
The language of restored relationship. I love that.
It's powerful, right?
It is. That phrase is the heartbeat of all the material we're looking at today. But to even begin to understand how butcher's block can be about relationship, we really have to establish the foundational problem that the biblical text prevents.
Right, we have to start at the baseline.
Exactly. We have to look at the baseline reality of this universe exactly as these texts describe it. And that reality is a profound mismatch.
Okay.
God is entirely, infinitely holy, and human beings are fundamentally not.
And I feel like we need to be really careful with that word holy because, I think we throw it around so much that it loses its edge.
Oh, absolutely.
We think holy just means like really, really nice or
Yeah.
morally well-behaved.
Right, like a Boy Scout.
Yeah.
But it is so much more dangerous than that. In the ancient understanding, holiness is not just an aesthetic preference.
It's not just a vibe.
No, it's not being the best person in the room. Holiness is the terrifying, unapproachable perfection of divine presence.
Terrifying's a good word for it.
It is like a blinding light. It is life in its most concentrated, absolute form. And the text argues that human sin is entirely, completely incompatible with that reality.
Because we tend to think of sin as a minor moral flaw, don't we?
We do.
Like, oh, I made a mistake on a math test.
Yeah.
Or it's a psychological malfunction.
Yeah.
Or maybe just a bit of social awkwardness.
Right? We think of it as, personal authenticity gone awry.
Yeah, we treat it like a personality quirk that we can just work on with a bit of self-help and a podcast.
But the biblical text defines sin as a catastrophic, covenantal rupture.
A rupture. That's a strong word.
It is active alienation. It's this defilement that fractures worship and creates a literal, insurmountable distance between humanity and the divine.
So it's not just a gap, it's a chasm.
Exactly. So the central dilemma of all biblical theology is this. How can a deeply compromised, defiled, sinful humanity possibly coexist with a perfectly holy God without being instantly consumed by that holiness.
And I was trying to come up with a way to visualize this gap without relying on, heavy theological jargon.
Okay, let's hear it.
So think about a state-of-the-art, highly sterilized clean room.
Okay.
The kind of facility where they manufacture sensitive microchips or develop pharmaceuticals, right?
Say.
In those rooms, the air is filtered down to the molecular level. Like a single rogue speck of dust or a microscopic skin cell can ruin millions of dollars of equipment and research.
Right. The tolerances are zero.
Zero. Now imagine you have just spent 3 days trekking through a dense, rotting swamp.
Oh, gross.
You are covered head to toe in mud, bacteria, decaying organic matter, and just absolute filth.
So you're just a walking biohazard.
A total biohazard.
Yeah.
And you need to walk into that pristine clean room.
That's not going to end well.
No. And the issue here isn't that the clean room is angry with you.
Right.
The room doesn't have, like, a personal vendetta against you.
Yeah.
The issue is that its very nature, its defining characteristic of absolute purity, fundamentally cannot coexist with your contamination.
It's just physics at that point.
Exactly. If you walk in there as you are, you destroy the environment. Or, in the case of divine holiness, the environment destroys you.
Yeah.
You can't just wipe your muddy boots on welcome mat and say, hey, I tried my best, I'm a good person deep down.
Because the contamination is woven into you.
It is. So if the creator of that room actually wants you in there, he actively desires to dwell with you. Something radical, something massive has to happen to bridge that gap.
That is a phenomenal way to ground this concept. It really is.
Thanks. I think it helps make it less abstract.
It perfectly captures what the source material emphasizes, The distance between a holy God and humanity is not just some moral embarrassment.
Right.
It is an absolute incompatibility. The mud must be dealt with, the defilement has to be cleansed, and the guilt must be resolved.
So how do we solve the mud problem?
Well, if we want to trace how this problem is solved, we really have to look at where the fracture first occurred.
The origin of the swamp.
Exactly. We have to examine what the sources called the architecture of access, starting at the very beginning of the timeline.
Which takes us all the way back to the Garden of Eden, the original clean room.
The very first one.
And I think the sources do a great job of reframing Eden. Because, we usually picture it as just a nice botanical garden where naked people walked around eating fruit.
Right, like a nature preserve.
Yeah, but the text paints a much deeper picture. Eden was a sanctuary. It was a place of unbroken communion. The environment of humanity and the environment of God were just overlapping realities.
It was the ultimate unmediated fellowship. There was no barrier. But then when sin enters in Genesis 3, the text pays very close attention to the immediate psychological and relational fallout.
Right, things change instantly.
They do.
Wow.
The very first things that happen are not, thunderbolts from the sky. The first consequences are totally internal.
Shame arrives.
Yes. Fear enters the human experience. Adam and Eve realize they are naked and they hide.
They literally hide from the clean room.
The alienation is instantaneous. The communion is ruptured from the inside out before any physical boundary is even established.
They feel the mud on themselves for the very first time, and they instinctively know they just don't belong in the clean room anymore.
That's exactly it. And then the text provides a definitive external visual of this rupture.
Okay.
We see the introduction of the cherubim and the flaming sword.
Right, placed at the east of the garden.
To guard the way to the tree of life.
A flaming sword. It is such an intense, almost frightening image.
It really is.
It's not just a keep-out sign. It is an active, lethal barrier.
It is the ultimate boundary marker. The theological term the sources use for this is the primal exile.
The primal exile.
Humanity is pushed eastward, away from the immediate presence of God. Access is officially denied.
The clean room is sealed shut.
Sealed. And human ingenuity, no matter how hard we try, cannot bypass a flaming sword.
You can't outsmart it.
You can't. And this moment is the bedrock foundation of all sacrificial theology in the narrative.
Before any of the other stuff happens.
Right. Long before there are any written laws or priests or formal altars, this is the baseline reality.
Yeah.
Access has been lost.
Okay, so the door is locked, and it's guarded by fire. But human history doesn't just end there.
Thankfully, no.
Very quickly in the text, we start seeing a specific human response to this lockout. In the very next chapter, we meet the children of Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
Cain and Abel. And this is where the concept of sacrifice officially enters the historical record, right?
It is. The logic of atonement starts to become visible almost immediately.
Like a reflex.
Exactly. If human sin fractured the communion, human beings instinctively realize they need some mechanism to reach back across that void.
They want back in.
So in Genesis 4, we see both Cain and Abel bringing offerings to God. But the narrative introduces a critical tension right off the bat.
Right.
Abel's offering of the firstborn of his flock is accepted, while Cain's offering of the fruit of the ground is not.
And I have to pause you here.
Sure.
Because this is a story that trips up a lot of readers.
It really does.
It feels incredibly arbitrary. I mean, Cain is a farmer, so he brings crops. Abel is a shepherd, he brings sheep. God accepts the meat and rejects the vegetables.
Yeah.
It just makes God seem, well, capricious. Like, he just prefers a barbecue over a salad. Why is one accepted and the other rejected?
It is a vital question, and it goes far beyond dietary preferences, I promise you.
Okay, good.
The Genesis account itself is admittedly pretty sparse on the details.
It doesn't explain much.
No, but the broader biblical commentary, specifically, as the author points out from the book of Hebrews, interprets this moment by focusing on the posture of the worshiper.
The posture?
Yes. Hebrews states that by faith, Abel offered a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain. The underlying principle being established here is that worship isn't just a creative exercise where humans get to decide the terms of engagement.
It's not just bringing whatever you happen to have lying around and assuming God has to be thrilled about it.
No, not at all. Acceptable worship must accord with God's will, and it must be driven by a posture of genuine faith and reverence.
So, going back to the clean room analogy.
Let's do it.
Cain's offering is like walking up to the security guard with a really pretty muddy rock you found outside, and you're sincerely offering it as your ticket inside.
Yeah.
Your sincerity doesn't change the fact that the rock introduces contamination.
Exactly. Whereas Abel's offering, involving the shedding of blood and the offering of life, begins to align with the deeper, more costly reality of what the rupture actually requires.
It recognizes the severity of the mud.
Precisely.
So we have this early glimmer that access requires a very specific, faithful approach. And then the sources move us forward to Noah in Genesis 8.
Another huge moment.
Right, because the world has descended into absolute chaos.
Yeah.
God hits the reset button with a massive flood, and when Noah finally steps off the ark, his very first act is to build an altar and offer sacrifices.
Which is a profound moment of theological development.
Because God responds, right?
He does. The text notes that God smells the pleasing aroma of the sacrifice and responds with covenant mercy. He promises never to destroy the earth in that way again. No, what does sacrifice signal here? It signals a stabilized relationship.
The sources use a phrase here that I found incredibly helpful. Patient grace.
Oh, it is a beautiful summary of the post-flood reality.
Because the world isn't perfect now.
Exactly. Think about it. The world is not suddenly fixed. The human heart, as God himself notes in that very chapter, is still inclined toward evil.
The contamination is still deeply embedded in humanity.
Still there. So why doesn't God just flood the earth again the next day?
Because of the altar.
Yes. Because the altar has established a space for patient grace. The sacrifice acts as a buffer.
A buffer, okay.
It signals that divine favor is restored, not because humanity is suddenly perfect, but because God is providing a mechanism to tolerate the world's brokenness without having to utterly destroy the world itself.
Worship has risen from mere survival into an ongoing covenant life.
Exactly. We are seeing this pattern build.
We are. But then we hit a massive, unavoidable roadblock in the narrative.
Oh, I know where you're going.
Yeah, and I want to push back hard on this next section on behalf of you, the listener, because we arrive at Abraham in Genesis 22.
The binding of Isaac.
This is the famous story. God tells Abraham to take his promised son, his only son, up a mountain and sacrifice him.
It's intense.
It is. Now, we can talk about patient grace and covenant life all we want, but to a modern reader, this sounds like pure psychological torture.
Right. It sounds horrific.
It sounds like the demands of a bloodthirsty pagan deity.
Yeah.
How did the sources possibly justify this?
It is arguably the most challenging narrative in the entire early biblical record. And honestly, it is meant to be shocking.
If you read it and aren't disturbed, you probably aren't paying attention.
Exactly. But the author of our source material argues that we cannot understand this story if we stop halfway up the mountain.
We have to finish the story.
You have to look at the resolution to understand the revelation.
Okay.
Abraham raises the knife, and at the very last possible second, God intervenes and stops him.
The angel of the Lord calls out, tells him not to lay a hand on the boy. And then Abraham sees a ram caught by its horns in a thicket. Yeah. He sacrifices the ram instead.
And that substitution is the entire point.
Substitution.
In that moment, Abraham names the place the Lord will provide. That phrase from Genesis 22.14 is the hinge upon which all subsequent sacrificial theology turns.
The Lord will provide.
Yes. This episode isn't God endorsing child sacrifice. It is the exact opposite.
Oh, interesting.
It is a permanent historical demonstration that God absolutely rejects the human attempt to manufacture our own ultimate atonement.
We can't provide the ultimate sacrifice.
No. The mountain becomes a witness to what the text calls substitutionary grace.
Substitutionary grace. Let's break that down.
Yeah.
I mean, it means the innocent takes the place of the guilty.
Yes.
The one who should die is spared because another dies in their place.
And the most crucial detail is who supplies the substitute.
Right. Abraham didn't bring the ram in his backpack just in case.
No, he didn't. God supplied the ram. The profound shift in the narrative is this. God demands a massive ultimate cost for the rupture of sin, but he himself provides the very thing he demands.
Wow.
Human beings cannot bridge the gap, so God supplies the substitute that bridges it for them. This creates a paradigm that will just echo through every subsequent era of biblical history.
It completely flips the narrative from humans desperately trying to appease an angry God to God graciously providing the means for humans to survive his holiness.
Yes, that is the perfect way to summarize it.
So Abraham gives us this powerful principle of substitution for a single family.
Mm-hmm.
But as the biblical timeline marches on, the scope expands. We aren't just dealing with a nomadic patriarch anymore.
No, we're talking about millions of people now.
An entire nation, Israel, trying to figure out how to live in the presence of this holy God. And that brings us to the book of Exodus, the story of Passover, and the descent into the absolute granular details of the wilderness laws.
The scale dramatically increases here, which means the mechanism of sacrifice has to scale with it.
It has to handle a lot more mud.
A lot more mud. So Exodus 12 gives us the narrative of the Passover, and Velazquez points out that this chapter is the indispensable foundation for understanding corporate worship.
Okay, set the scene for us.
The Israelites are enslaved in Egypt. A series of devastating plagues has dismantled the Egyptian empire, and the final plague is announced, the death of the firstborn.
And the instructions given to Israel are incredibly specific and deeply visceral.
Very visceral.
Every household is commanded to take a spotless lamb, slaughter it, and physically paint its blood on the wooden doorposts of their homes.
I mean, imagine the sensory reality of that night.
It must have been overwhelming.
The bleeding of the lambs, the metallic smell of blood, the sheer fear of the impending judgment. They are told to stay inside, to eat the roasted meat in haste with their sandals on, ready to flee.
Bags packed.
Bags packed. And when the judgment sweeps through the nation of Egypt, the text says that when God sees the blood on the doorposts, he will pass over that house.
Now, the sources make a massive, vital clarification here, because it is so easy to misinterpret this part.
It really is.
The blood on the door is not a magical ward.
Right.
It's not some superstitious spell keeping evil spirits away, like hanging garlic in a window.
Not at all. The text uses a very specific term. Covenant blood.
Covenant blood.
Think about the logic of the event. Why does the judgment pass over the house?
Because of the blood.
But why? Because the blood signifies that death has already occurred there.
Oh.
The judgment has already fallen. It fell on the lamb.
So the lamb acted as a symbolic substitute for the family inside.
Exactly. The demands of justice have been meted out on the animal, so they do not need to be meted out on the human beings.
I want to read a direct quote from the analysis here because it is a brilliant distillation of the whole event.
Let's hear it.
It says, "Deliverance comes through judgment borne by another."
That is the core equation of Passover. Deliverance through judgment borne by another.
So concise.
And what is so fascinating about this historical moment is how it permanently fuses two massive theological concepts together. Sacrifice and redemption.
Before this, they were kind of separate.
Well, before this, sacrifice was mostly about maintaining individual or family access, like with Abraham. But here, an entire nation is physically, economically, and politically rescued from brutal slavery because a lamb died.
It's on a macro level now.
Yes. From that night onward, the collective memory of Israel is shaped by this event. Their very existence as a free people is tethered to a sacrificial rescue.
So when they worship, they are not just philosophically contemplating God.
No. They are remembering the blood on the doorpost that bought their freedom.
Which is an incredibly dramatic high-stakes narrative.
Very high stakes.
But then, once they are free, they march out into the wilderness, they arrive at Mount Sinai, and the narrative hits what most modern readers consider a massive brick wall.
The wall of laws.
We hit the book of Leviticus, and I'm going to speak for you, the listener, right now. Leviticus is where reading plans go to die.
It is the great graveyard of good intentions, yes.
It is exhausting. You come off the high of the parting of the Red Sea, and suddenly you are reading 60 pages of instructions about kidney fat, the exact way to splash blood against the side of an altar, what to do with a skin disease, and how to slaughter pigeons.
It's a lot.
It feels like we've left a grand epic and walked into a highly regulated slaughterhouse. Why in the world is there so much messy, granular, repetitive detail? Does God just enjoy complicated bureaucracy?
It feels bureaucratic to us because we are totally detached from the reality of the clean room.
Ah, right, the clean room.
But if we connect this massive list of rules to the bigger picture, the detail in Leviticus is actually an expression of profound, exhaustive grace.
Grace. Leviticus is grace.
Yes. The text describes Leviticus as providing the grammar of holy presence.
The grammar of holy presence. What does that mean exactly?
It means that human sin and human life are incredibly complex. Sin isn't just one monolithic concept.
It's not just one type of mud.
Exactly. It is multifaceted. Sometimes sin is deliberate rebellion. Sometimes it is an accidental mistake.
Right.
Sometimes it is a lingering defilement from contact with death or disease. Sin causes moral guilt, yes, but it also causes ritual impurity, social fracture, and relational distance.
It messes everything up.
It does. If God is going to actually move his presence into the center of their camp, if the clean room is going to be set up right in the middle of the swamp, then the mechanism to deal with contamination has to be comprehensive enough to handle every possible angle of human failure.
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. If the problem is complex, the solution can't just be a single generic "I'm sorry" card.
Exactly. You need specific tools for specific problems. So the sources break down this grammar by looking at the 5 main offerings detailed in the first 7 chapters of Leviticus.
The 5 offerings.
Yes. These aren't just 5 ways to kill an animal. They are 5 distinct vocabularies for restoring relationship. Let's look at the nuances.
Let's do it.
First, you have the burnt offering. In this ritual, the entire animal is consumed by fire on the altar. Nothing is kept. It symbolizes total, absolute consecration and surrender to God.
So it's the worshiper basically saying, my entire life belongs to you without holding anything back?
Yes, total surrender. Then secondly, you have the grain offering.
And wait, let me interrupt for a second.
Go ahead.
Why grain? We've been talking nonstop about blood, life for a life, the gravity of sin. Suddenly we have flour and olive oil on the altar. How does that fit the pattern?
It is a brilliant pivot in the system. The grain offering is completely bloodless.
Right.
It was typically offered alongside the burnt offering. In an agrarian society, grain represents your livelihood.
Your job, basically.
Yes, it represents the sweat of your brow, your daily survival. By bringing flour and oil, the worshiper is expressing tribute and thanksgiving.
Okay.
It is a physical acknowledgement that God is the ultimate source of all provision. You are dedicating the work of your hands back to the one who gave you the strength to work.
So we have total devotion with the burnt offering and profound gratitude with the grain offering. What is the third?
The third is the peace offering, and this one fundamentally shifts our understanding of the whole system.
How so?
Well, when a peace offering was made, the fat and certain organs were burned for God. A portion was given to the priest, but the majority of the meat was given back to the worshiper.
Wait, they get to keep the sacrifice?
They don't just keep it, they are commanded to eat it.
Really?
Yes. The worshiper, their family, and their friends sit down in the courtyard of the sanctuary and have a feast.
They literally have a barbecue in the presence of God.
That is exactly what it is. It symbolizes table fellowship. It is a shared meal between God, the priests, and the people.
Wow.
Think about the profound implications of this. It proves that the ultimate goal of all this blood and fire isn't just basic survival. God isn't just trying to keep from striking them with lightning.
Right. He doesn't just want them to barely survive.
He wants communion. He wants to eat with his people. The peace offering is a celebration of a relationship that is intact and flourishing.
I love that. It completely demolishes the idea of a grumpy deity just demanding his pound of flesh. It is an invitation to dinner.
Exactly.
But obviously, to get to that dinner, you have to be clean, Which brings us to the final two offerings.
Yes, the sin offering and the guilt offering. These are the heavy lifters for dealing with active contamination.
The real mud scrubbers.
Exactly. The sin offering addresses impurity. It cleanses the individual and the sanctuary from unintentional sin and unavoidable defilements. It essentially resets the spiritual environment so the person can safely approach.
The sources refer to this as cultic cleansing. Can we break that word down for a second?
Sure.
Because cult means something very different to us today. We think of compounds and brainwashing.
Right, right. In theological and historical terms, cultic simply refers to the system of religious worship and ritual. The cult is just the prescribed way a community interacts with the divine.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, cultic cleansing means wiping the spiritual operating system clean. It removes the invisible stain of sin from the community's worship space so that God's presence isn't forced to leave.
Got it. And then the guilt offering.
The guilt offering is highly specific. It focuses on restitution.
Restitution.
Yes. This was required when someone committed a specific offense that required compensation, either defrauding a neighbor or desecrating something holy.
So it's not just a generic sin.
No, it wasn't enough to just say sorry. You had to repay the debt plus a 20% penalty and then offer the ram.
Wow, a 20% penalty.
It addressed the very real material damage that sin causes in a community.
So when you step back and look at Leviticus chapters 1 through 7, it is not a chaotic butcher shop at all.
No, it's incredibly ordered.
It is a highly sophisticated, deeply compassionate architecture. It addresses total devotion, daily gratitude, joyful fellowship, spiritual purification, and social restitution.
It covers all the bases.
It is a complete toolkit for keeping the muddy boots clean enough to stay in the plain room.
It is a breathtakingly thorough system of grace. And this entire complex machinery reaches its absolute zenith once a year on a day called Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement.
Detailed in Leviticus 16.
Yes, this is the single most important day on the ancient Israelite calendar.
This is the one day the high priest actually gets to go into the innermost part of the clean room, right?
Yeah.
The most holy place.
Yes, behind the heavy veil.
The ultimate barrier.
The high priest strips off his ornate, jeweled garments and puts on simple, unadorned white linen. He enters the most holy place with the blood of a bull to atone for his own sins, carrying a cloud of incense to obscure the sheer glory of God's presence so he doesn't die.
That's so dramatic.
But the most striking part of the ritual involves 2 goats, chosen to represent the entire nation.
The text describes this in vivid detail. 2 goats, but 2 very different fates.
It is a dual picture of atonement.
Okay.
The first goat is slaughtered, its blood is brought behind the veil and sprinkled on the mercy seat, the lid of the Ark of the Covenant.
The epicenter of the clean room.
Yes. This blood acts as an ultimate annual cultic cleansing for the entire sanctuary, wiping away the accumulated defilement of the nation's sins over the past year. It satisfies the demand of holiness.
But the second goat survives.
The second goat is the scapegoat. The high priest lays both of his hands on the head of this living goat and publicly confesses all the wickedness, rebellion, and sins of the Israelites.
Out loud.
Out loud. The text says he symbolically puts the sins on the head of the goat. Then this goat is led away by an appointed man, driven completely out of the camp, far into the desolate wilderness, never to return.
The visual is just staggering.
Yeah.
The first goat shows that the penalty of death has been paid. The second goat provides a psychological and physical visual that the sin has been utterly removed from their presence.
It is carried away into the wasteland.
Between the cleansing blood and the removed sin, the Day of Atonement allows a holy God to maintain his residence in the center of a sinful camp for 1 more year.
It is the ultimate balancing act of justice and mercy.
Okay, so God has provided this brilliant, multifaceted, hyper-detailed system. The problem's technically solved, right?
Technically, yes.
They have the mechanics to maintain the relationship. But there is a glaring issue, and it's the issue that always ruins every perfect system: human nature.
Always.
What happens when people start treating this profound, bloody grammar of grace like a spiritual vending machine?
That is exactly where the narrative inevitably goes.
Because it is so easy to imagine an Israelite thinking, look, I can cheat my business partner on Thursday, lie to my wife on Friday, and as long as I bring a decent-looking pigeon to the priest on Saturday, the ledger is wiped clean.
Right. I can just pay the toll and keep doing whatever I want.
Exactly.
And this is a massive crisis in the biblical story. The sources move us out of the wilderness and into the era of Israel's kings and prophets to show what happens when the ritual becomes completely severed from reality.
When the external action is completely divorced from the internal posture.
Yes. The text points to King David as a prime example of someone who realized the terrifying limitation of the system.
David, right.
In Psalm 51, written after David committed adultery and murder, massive, deliberate, high-handed sins for which there was no prescribed animal sacrifice, he makes a startling realization.
He writes, "You do not delight in sacrifice, or I would bring it. You do not take pleasure in burnt offerings. My sacrifice, O God, is a broken spirit."
It is a staggering thing for the king of Israel to write.
It really is.
He is realizing that the thousands of goats and bulls offered at the temple are entirely useless if the heart of the worshiper is rebellious.
The animals don't matter if the heart is wrong.
Exactly. The author of our text highlights this as one of the Bible's most crucial tensions. The sacrificial system was ordained by God, absolutely, but it was never meant to function mechanically.
It was never a magic trick.
No. If there is no contrition, no genuine repentance, the sacrifice isn't worship. It is just theater.
Theater. And this realization opens the door for the heavy hitters of the Old Testament, the prophets.
Oh, they do not hold back.
No, they don't. You read books like Isaiah, Jeremiah, Amos, and Micah, and they are absolutely screaming at the people. And they use shocking language.
Very abrasive.
Through the prophet Amos, God says, I despise your religious festivals. Your assemblies are a stench to me. Even though you bring me burnt offerings, I will not accept them.
Wow.
This is God rejecting the very system he designed in Leviticus. Are the prophets trying to abolish the sacrificial system? Are they just like ancient progressives trying to move past the blood?
It is a very common misunderstanding, but the text clarifies this brilliantly. The prophets are not anti-sacrifice.
Okay, what are they?
They are anti-hypocrisy. They are fiercely, violently criticizing a nation that is bringing flawless animals to the altar while simultaneously practicing systemic injustice, engaging in idolatry, and neglecting the vulnerable.
So they are bringing the peace offering to secure table fellowship with God on the Sabbath, and then on Monday, they are rigging the scales in the marketplace to defraud a poor widow.
Exactly. They have severed the ritual from covenant fidelity. They thought the blood of the animal basically manipulated God into ignoring their behavior.
A spiritual bribe.
A bribe, yes. The prophet's critique reveals a terrifying truth. Atonement cannot be manipulated. You cannot bribe the judge of the universe with a goat.
You just can't.
The expert source material summarizes it perfectly. Sacrifice restores fellowship only where repentance, faith, and a desire for obedience are present.
It has to have both.
True atonement doesn't just offer you a clean slate for the past, it demands a transformed allegiance for the future. God desires justice, mercy, and humility. If the heart remains hard, the slaughtered animal is nothing but a dead carcass.
Man, so we have arrived at this agonizing impasse in the grand narrative.
We have.
The Levitical system, as perfect as its grammar is, demands a pure heart to be effective. But the prophets are ruthlessly pointing out that human hearts are continually, relentlessly failing.
They're constantly muddy.
The internal contamination is too deep. And because the animal sacrifices couldn't actually change human nature, because the blood of a bull can't reach into your soul and rewire your desires, the sacrifices had to be repeated. Endlessly. Day after day, year after year, century after century.
Sheer exhaustion of the system is overwhelming.
Yes. I mean, think about the physical exhaustion of being a Levitical priest. You wake up, you slaughter animals, you go to sleep smelling like blood and smoke. The next morning, you wake up and do it again.
It never stops.
The river of blood never stops flowing because the people never stop sinning. The clean room keeps getting dirty. The barrier remains.
It does.
So the existential question of the entire text becomes, how is this covenantal rupture ever permanently healed? How do we stop the endless cycle?
This brings us to the absolute climax of the biblical narrative. The New Testament's presentation of Jesus Christ as the final, ultimate sacrifice.
The climax.
Every single thread we have traced, from the flaming sword in Eden, to the substitute ram of Abraham, to the painted doors of Passover, to the intricate grammar of Leviticus, to the desperate longing of the prophets for a clean heart.
All of it.
All of those historical and theological vectors converge on one historical person.
The sources show how the writers of the New Testament explicitly, forcefully connect these ancient dots to Jesus, don't they?
They do, constantly.
When John the Baptist sees Jesus walking toward him, he doesn't say, "Behold, a great moral teacher."
No.
He uses the vocabulary of the altar. He says, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world."
Right. And the Apostle Paul writes to the Corinthians and calls Christ our Passover lamb who has been sacrificed.
The Apostle Peter writes that we are redeemed by the precious blood of Christ, like that of a lamb without blemish or spot.
And the entire book of Hebrews is just a masterclass in demonstrating how Jesus is both the perfect, flawless high priest and the perfect, unblemished offering.
He's both. But the sources emphasize that Jesus isn't just a repetition of the old system. He isn't just a slightly better goat.
Not at all.
There is a decisive, universe-altering difference between the old sacrifices and Christ's work.
The defining concept is finality.
Finality.
The phrase that the book of Hebrews hammers home over and over again is once for all.
Once for all.
That single phrase represents a massive paradigm shift from the exhaustion of Leviticus. The Old Testament sacrifices had to be repeated ad nauseum because, by their very nature, animal blood cannot equate to the value of human rebellion.
Right. An animal isn't a human.
The animal sacrifices could only cover, anticipate, and prefigure. They were road signs pointing to a destination.
They were the trailer for the movie.
A perfect analogy. But Christ accomplishes what the animals only signified. As the infinite Holy Son of God who takes on human flesh, his life possesses infinite value.
Because of who he is.
Therefore, his substitutionary death possesses infinite atoning power. He doesn't merely symbolize the removal of sin. He actually, historically, affects it. His sacrifice achieves the permanent, irrevocable removal of the barrier.
Which makes the cross the absolute, undeniable epicenter of everything we are discussing today.
The absolute center.
The sources describe the cross as the cosmic intersection, where the absolute judgment of God and the infinite mercy of God finally collide.
And we see the echoes of everything we've discussed happening at Golgotha. The innocent, perfect Son dies in place of the guilty, rebellious humanity.
The ultimate fulfillment of the ram in the thicket.
Exactly. His blood brings permanent deliverance from the judgment of death.
The ultimate final Passover.
Yes.
But perhaps the most visceral emotional imagery the text brings out is what happens at the exact moment of Christ's death.
It gives me chills every time.
The gospel accounts record that when Jesus breathed his last, the massive, heavy veil inside the temple in Jerusalem, the veil that separated the most holy place, the barrier that kept the contamination out of the clean room, was physically torn in two.
From top to bottom.
From top to bottom, signifying that it was an act of God, not an act of man.
Right. And the tearing of that veil is the theological reversal of Eden.
Reversal.
The primal exile is over. The flaming sword that guarded the way to communion is finally extinguished by the blood of the Lamb.
The door is literally kicked open.
The blood of the new covenant becomes the ultimate, eternal language of restored relationship. The endless river of animal blood dries up forever because the work is finished.
Wow.
Sinners, covered in mud and defilement, are finally, permanently washed and brought near.
Okay, that is a breathtaking narrative arc. I mean, we have literally walked from the locked gates of a garden to the torn veil of a temple.
It's quite a journey.
It is. Now that we have that timeline in our heads, let's zoom out a bit. The sources provide a deep dive into the theological depth and core principles, exploring the underlying physics of this entire story.
The load-bearing pillars, so to speak.
Exactly. What are the load-bearing pillars that hold up this theology of sacrifice?
Well, the author synthesizes this beautifully into a series of core principles, and we can really focus on 4 massive pillars that uphold everything we've just discussed.
Okay, what's the first one?
First and foremost, sin is deadly serious.
Deadly serious.
The text refuses to let us trivialize our rebellion. Sin incurs real existential judgment before a perfectly holy God. Sacrifice exists because sin defiles and separates.
Right.
The entire bloody system of the Old Testament was designed to train the human conscience to understand that communion with the Creator cannot be casual. You do not just stroll into the presence of infinite purity.
It is a massive reality check.
It is.
The second pillar the text highlights is substitution and representation. We saw this with Abraham, we saw it with the Passover lamb, we saw it on the Day of Atonement. But in Christ, it converges perfectly. He doesn't just die for us, he dies instead of us.
Yes. The innocent bears the judgment for the guilty, and as our representative, our covenant head, he enters the heavenly clean room on our behalf, carrying our humanity into the divine presence.
Which leads directly into the third pillar. God provides what he requires.
Yeah.
From the ram caught in the thicket to the infinite Lamb of God on the cross.
And Vlasis makes a profound pastoral point here. This specific principle is designed to protect the human heart from the two great extremes of religion, pride and despair.
Okay, how does it protect against pride?
Well, pride looks at the clean room and says, I can earn my way in, I can be moral enough, I can try hard enough, I can make myself acceptable to God.
I can clean myself.
Right. The sacrificial system says, no, you cannot. Your best efforts are still contaminated. It destroys self-righteousness.
And how does it protect against despair?
Despair looks at the mud on its hands and says, I am too filthy, I am too broken, there is absolutely no way back, I am lost forever.
Which is how a lot of people feel.
Exactly. But the gospel of substitutionary grace silences that despair. It says, you are right, you cannot make a way, but God, at infinite cost to himself, has provided the sacrifice for you.
Wow.
The provision comes entirely from outside yourself.
That is incredibly freeing. The pressure is entirely off your own performance.
It is.
And the fourth major pillar the text outlines is that the altar is a classroom.
The classroom.
Sacrifice is deeply pedagogical. It was meant to teach Israel, and it teaches us today, how to interpret the spiritual reality of the universe. It shapes memory. The blood is a sermon about the cost of grace.
And if we step back and look at the macro-level structure of the entire Bible, we see these exact principles operating at every single stage of history.
I was thinking about this while reading the sources, and it reminds me of a fractal.
A fractal. I like that.
Yeah. You know, in mathematics, a fractal is a geometric shape where no matter how far you zoom in or zoom out, you see the exact same pattern repeating itself on larger and larger scales.
Right.
The biblical narrative is a theological fractal. We see the exact same pattern, human brokenness, the absolute necessity of divine substitution, and the costly restoration of presence repeating on larger and larger scales.
That is a phenomenal analogy. It really works. The sources map this chronological fractal out for us.
Where does it start?
It begins in eternity past, where God's holy and loving nature is the unchanging foundation. Then we move to creation, which was originally designed for unbroken fellowship.
The clean room before this swamp even existed.
Yes. Then comes the fall, which introduces guilt, shame, death, and exile. The rupture occurs, creating the absolute need for sacrifice.
Right.
This leads to the era of the covenant, where God establishes relationships with patriarchs like Abraham, maintained by the blood of altars.
Which scales up to redemption in the Exodus, linking sacrifice with literal physical rescue from slavery. And then into the kingdom era, where God's presence miraculously dwells among millions of people in a physical temple, mediated day and night by the Levitical priests.
But the fractal also includes tragedy.
It does.
It includes the exile, the catastrophic loss of the temple presence when Israel's hypocrisy finally collapses the system. The sacrifices stop, the access is withdrawn, and the nation experiences the horror of abandonment.
Which fuels the era of prophetic longing, the desperate anticipation of a deeper restoration and a permanently clean heart.
A longing that finally, ultimately lands on the Messiah. Jesus arrives as the ultimate fractal point. He is the priest, he is the temple, and he is the offering, all simultaneously.
But the timeline doesn't actually end at the cross, does it? The sources point us toward the absolute end of the timeline.
The very end.
The ultimate goal of the universe, the new creation.
This is where the theology becomes absolutely breathtaking. The text points to a specific vision at the very end of the Bible in Revelation chapter 21.
Okay, set the scene.
The Apostle John is given a vision of the new heavens and the new earth, eternity restored. And in verse 22, he makes a stunning observation about the New Jerusalem. He says, I saw no temple in the city, for its temple is the Lord God the Almighty and the Lamb.
No temple. No altars, no veils, no boundaries.
None, because the sacrificial problem has been completely definitively resolved.
Wow.
The work of atonement is fully realized and applied to the cosmos. The barrier is gone forever. Access to God is immediate, unmediated, and unbroken. The redeemed humanity lives in the constant, joyful presence of the Creator because the blood of the Lamb has fully and finally restored the fellowship.
The goal of the entire universe, from Genesis to Revelation, is communion without a barrier.
Precisely.
Okay, I have to pause because this is massive, cosmic, universe-altering theology.
It's huge.
We are talking about the architecture of eternity
Yeah.
and the mechanics of divine justice. But let's bring this all the way down to earth.
Let's do it.
If you're a listener driving to a job you hate on a Tuesday morning, or maybe you're trying to navigate a struggling marriage or dealing with a terrifying medical diagnosis, this massive theology about ancient goats and cosmic veils can feel a bit, well, disconnected.
Sure, it can feel abstract.
How does this clean room reality actually change the way you operate on a random Tuesday?
It is the most important question we can ask. Because theology that doesn't touch Tuesday morning is just trivia.
Right.
The sources dedicate a fantastic section to the highly practical implications of all this. The first massive shift is how this changes the way we approach God in our daily lives, particularly in prayer.
Okay, how does it change prayer?
The text argues that understanding sacrifice changes our posture to one of simultaneous confidence and reverence.
Confidence because the veil is torn, but reverence because we know what it cost to tear it.
Exactly. I was struck by a specific phrase in the author's analysis. Prayer is not presumptuous familiarity, it is blood-bought communion.
Blood-bought communion. That is heavy.
Think about what that means when you pray. You aren't standing there nervously reciting your spiritual resume to God, hoping you've been good enough this week to earn his ear.
Hoping your muddy boots are clean enough?
Right. You do not stand on personal worthiness. You stand entirely on a finished work. That radically shifts your internal state from anxiety and performance to profound peace. You are accepted because the substitute was accepted.
It completely kills the imposter syndrome we feel when we try to talk to God.
It really does.
And the text also points out how this theology radically changes how we process suffering. Because suffering is the ultimate test of any worldview.
It is. The author brings in a phenomenal connection to the Apostle Paul's logic in Romans chapter 8, verse 32.
Okay, what does Paul say?
It is an anchor for the soul. Paul writes, "He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things?"
Wow.
Think about the unassailable logic of the cross applied to your pain. If God has already addressed your deepest, most existential problem, your total alienation from the source of life.
The ultimate problem.
Right. And he did it by paying the incomprehensible, agonizing cost of his own son, then your current suffering cannot possibly mean you are abandoned.
If he didn't abandon you when you were an enemy covered in mud, he certainly isn't going to abandon you when you were inside the clean room going through a hard time.
Exactly. The ultimate problem is solved. Therefore, the current problems are manageable under his grace.
The logic of the cross anchors our hope in the middle of pain.
Yes.
But there is a third practical implication, and it might be the most challenging one.
Oh, definitely.
It has to do with how we interact with the people around us. If this massive cosmic atonement restores your vertical fellowship with God, it fundamentally demands a change in your horizontal relationships with others.
The text makes it very blunt. Forgiven people must become forgiving people.
Which is so hard to do.
It is, but it completely dismantles human pride, factionalism, and bitterness. Think about it in financial terms.
Okay.
You cannot furiously, violently hold on to a $10 debt that your neighbor owes you when your own multi-billion-dollar bankruptcy was just entirely paid off by a substitute.
You just can't. It's absurd.
It exposes the utter hypocrisy of holding a grudge. Recognizing the sheer magnitude of what you have been forgiven destroys the self-justifying posture that ruins families and communities.
That is incredibly convicting. But the author also leaves us with a few warning signs, dangers to avoid, pitfalls that modern readers often stumble into when trying to adapt this theology.
Yes, two main dangers.
Okay, what's the first?
The first is treating the atonement as merely symbolic. This is the temptation to say, the cross is just a beautiful metaphor. It just shows how much God loves us, like a tragic play.
Right, like it's just a nice story to inspire us.
We must resist that. As we've seen, it wasn't just a demonstration, it was an execution. It actually legally and cultically accomplished the cleansing required for access. It wasn't a metaphor, it was a mechanism.
It was a mechanism. I like that.
Yeah.
And the second danger is separating forgiveness from holiness.
Yes. Believing that grace is just a get-out-of-jail-free card that gives you permission to remain entirely unchanged.
Which we see all the time.
As we discussed with the prophets, treating the cross like a vending machine is spiritual malpractice. Atonement restores access to the clean room precisely so that the purity of the clean room can begin to transform you.
God brings us near to set us apart.
Exactly. Grace that doesn't change you isn't the grace of the Bible.
Well, we have covered an immense amount of ground today.
We really have.
To synthesize everything we've pulled from these incredible sources, from the infographics to the deep theological analysis, sacrifice is not some ancient, embarrassing superstition that modern, enlightened people need to hide away in the attic.
No.
It is not the defeat of fellowship. It is the breathtakingly costly restoration of it.
God does not ignore sin because he is infinitely holy and just. A judge who sweeps murder under the rug isn't loving, he's corrupt. But he also does not leave his people stranded in the wasteland because he is infinitely loving. He makes a way. He provides the substitute. He opens the clean room through the blood of the Lamb.
And that leaves us with a final, lingering thought for you to chew on as you go about the rest of your day. Think about the massive scope of what we just explored. If the creator of the universe went to such immense, agonizing lengths to tear down the ultimate veil, if he poured out his own life to permanently secure your access to him, what self-made barriers, what lingering personal guilt, or what trivial modern distractions are you still building to keep yourself at a distance?
The debt has been borne.
The flaming sword is extinguished. The way is wide open. Will you step into the communion?